Hello, Neogenians. Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. Today we're talking about how to protect yourself from evil spirits and what even evil spirits are. See, we're continuing to read the Gospel of Philip, the gospel that was once banned by the church, and the particular portion that we're getting into discusses evil spirits and how to protect oneself from them. And even if you think, oh, evil spirits, they don't exist, we're going to be talking about how we can understand these ideas in terms of how we know reality works today and how it affects our mind and our psyche. So this is really important information. So we're going to get started right away here. As always, please like and subscribe. My channel is about reaching new people and helping build a new consciousness through creating a new world through a new consciousness. So when you hit like and subscribe, it helps spread this information around. I appreciate it very much. If you enjoy my work, consider becoming a member on Patreon and YouTube for members only videos, new ones every single week. And my new book, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, is available on Amazon right now. And my second book, Meta-Rationalism, The New Science of Mind, is available for pre-order. Links are in the description of this video. All right, my friends. Let's get started here. We are talking about evil spirits, how to protect oneself as we explore this once banned Gospel of Philip. This is an extremely controversial gospel. It's actually one that inspired the Da Vinci Code. Why did it inspire the Da Vinci Code? Because in it is where Jesus Christ kisses Mary, and Mary is called the companion of Jesus, and people have interpreted that as meaning that that is Christ's wife. We're not talking about that today, though. We talked about that last week. Today, we are getting into a discussion of evil spirits and how they affect humanity. So what are we talking about when it comes to evil spirits? Well, remember, in Gnosticism, what are evil spirits? In Gnosticism, evil spirits are archons or rulers. They are dark beings. And what are these dark beings trying to do? They are trying to keep humanity trapped in the material world. They're trying to keep humanity enslaved. So that's what these archonic evil spirits are trying to do. So let's just get started right away by reading a passage from this gospel. And it's all going to make sense. Like anytime we read this gospel, it might sound a little confusing at first, but we're going to interpret this and we're going to understand it. By the way, you can read all of this for free at gnosis.org. People are like, oh, where can I read this stuff? Gnosis.org, gnosis.org. It has all of the Gnostic literature that was found in the Nag Hammadi library in the 1940s. So you can go check that out. Just it's a really great resource, great website. I highly recommend it. All right, let's begin. Let's see what this has to say. We start here. Now pay attention, because we're gonna have to break this down bit by bit. The forms of evil spirit include male ones and female ones. And this is very important. So we're talking about evil spirits and that they take the form of male spirits or female spirits. And one thing that you have to remember in this entire gospel is all about the interaction between masculine and feminine energy. That is what the kiss between Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene represent, the unification of the masculine and the feminine. So this theme now is being repeated in understanding the domain of these evil beings, the domain of these archonic forces. And so it says the form of evil spirits include male ones and female ones. Now, remember as well, I know we barely have gotten started, but remember as well that this gospel is not to be taken literally, but metaphorically, allegorically, and symbolically. For example, the kiss between Mary and Jesus isn't about a literal kiss, but about the unification of the masculine and feminine elements. Now, it's possible that they actually did kiss. That's very possible, but it's being represented here to get across the idea of the unification of the two into a singular one. So we're continuing this here, and remember, we're taking things archetypally and allegorically. We're going to break all this down. So the forms of evil spirits include male ones and female ones. The males are they which unite with the souls which inhabit a female form, but the females are they which are mingled with those in a male form, those who are disobedient. So the evil male spirits go towards females, and the evil female spirits go towards males. And none shall be able to escape them, since they detain him if he does not receive a male power or a female power. The bridegroom and the bride. That's very important. what was just said right now, the bridegroom and the bride. Remember that, because this is repeated over and over and over again in this gospel, the idea of Jesus and Mary, the bridegroom and the bride. And this is a Valentinian Gnostic text, and they had a ritual known as the ritual of the bridal chamber, which was all about the unification of the masculine and feminine. So this is, we're going to see what's happening here. One receives them from the mirrored bridal chamber. So we're talking about the bridal chamber and it being mirrored, a reflection. That's also important. When the wanton woman sees a male sitting alone, they leap down on him and play with him and defile him. So also the lecherous men, when they see a beautiful woman sitting alone, they persuade her and compel her, wishing to defile her. But if they can see the man and his wife sitting beside one another, the female cannot come into the man, nor can the male come into the woman. So if the image and the angel are united with one another, neither can they venture to go into the man or the woman. And I'm going to highlight that because that's very important, and I want to make sure that I get explain that part. All right, so what's this? This is really interesting. What's being discussed here? Well, they're using allegories and they're using metaphors, and they're saying, hey, you know how it's like if there's a single guy out there, that there'll be some women that are trying to get him into bed, and if there's a single woman out there, well, there'll be men trying to get her into bed. But if they're married, then that generally doesn't happen. You know, if someone comes up to you at a bar or something, and you go, oh, hey, no, sorry, I'm married, and usually if they're a respectful person, they'll go away. But there's that idea, if one is married, then these forces represented here by men or women trying to get one into bed are repelled. So what does this have to do with the evil spirits? Well, the evil spirits are representative of, well, okay, let's really talk about this and break this down, okay? So we have the forms of evil spirits, which can be both male and female. The male spirits target souls in female bodies, and the female spirits target souls in male bodies. So how can we understand what we're talking? Now, this is very, very cool. How we can interpret this is by understanding the concept of the anima and the animus. So what is the anima and the animus? The anima and the animus are psychological functions discovered by Carl Jung. So Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist, highly intelligent individual. If you've ever heard the word, I'm sure you've heard the word introvert or extrovert, he coined that word. And he also popularized archetypes, which are patterns that exist in the mind. And for those who don't know, Carl Jung was extremely interested in Gnosticism. He actually wore a Gnostic ring, and he wrote his own pseudo-Gnostic book called The Seven Sermons to the Dead, which I highly recommend it. It's very short. I actually read it on my channel once. It's very good. Maybe we'll read it again sometime because it's such a good book, or I'll do a video on it. So Carl Jung was highly interested in things like alchemy, Gnosticism, myths, and legends. Why? Because he believed that they held a secret. He believed that they secretly contained archetypal patterns, archetypes. Now, it's very interesting, you know, that archon and archetype come from the same root word, arche, which is a little interesting because we can understand archons as archetypes. Now, this is not a purposeful connection, but it is interesting nonetheless. So what does this mean? It means when we are talking about evil spirits, we are talking about patterns in the mind or archetypes. And if this sounds confusing, don't worry, it'll all make sense in a minute. So archetypes are patterns in the mind, and these evil spirits represent a particular kind of pattern in the mind. And I'll give you one quick example. For example, the head archon, the chief archon, the evilest of all the evil spirits is Yaldabaoth, which is associated with the God of the Bible. Gnostics looked at the God of the Bible as being the chief archon. So in Jungian terminology, from a Jungian perspective, what would we understand Yaldabaoth to be? Well, we wouldn't understand him to literally be some being that actually created the earth and is enslaving humanity. Rather, we would understand him as representing the ego. Why? Because the ego represents Yaldabaoth, and the true God of divine light represents the self or the higher self. And so Yaldabaoth, the God of the Bible, what does he say? He says, I am the one true God. There is no God but me. Now, what happens with the ego if you believe that that's who you truly are? If you identify with your ego, you go, oh, the ego is the true self. It's the one true me. There is no other me but this me. That's what the ego says if you identify with it. But if you realize that the ego is not what you are, it's just a small aspect of yourself, that it is the servant of your higher self, the inner star, your true self, then you are able to defeat Yaldabaoth and ascend to the realm of divine light by understanding the truth about what you are. Now, just real quick, I want to say we don't look at the ego as being inherently negative. The ego is not inherently negative. It's a tool. It's a very powerful tool. It's the center of your field of consciousness. It gives you self-awareness. But if you identify with it, that's when it becomes a problem. So you need to use it as a tool, not identify with it. But why am I talking about all this? Because we can understand these evil spirits as being different archetypes or patterns within the mind. Like Yaldabaoth, we can represent being the pattern of the ego. So what do we represent these particular evil spirits with? We can understand them as the psychological concepts of the anima and animus. What are these things? Remember, these are functions in the mind. So the anima is the feminine side that exists inside of a man. And the animus is the masculine side within a woman. So Carl Jung believed that every man had an inner feminine and every woman had an inner masculine. And for the man, that inner female was known as the anima. And for the woman, the inner feminine, inner masculine was known as the animus. And so for us to be balanced and whole, we need to integrate these aspects of ourselves. So if we don't, though, we might experience what's known as archetypal possession. So do you see here? The entire Gospel of Philip is about uniting the masculine and feminine principles. That's what the entire Gospel of Philip is about. And essentially what this particular aspect is saying is if the masculine and feminine is not united, it can be taken over by an evil spirit. And it's representative, and they use the example of people who are married. You know, if you're married, you're not going to have all these men and women trying to get you into bed. And essentially this is saying, if we integrate our inner opposite, if the male integrates their inner feminine and the female integrates their inner masculine, it's an inner marriage. It's an inner alchemy. It's an inner unification. And that is what prevents archetypal possession from occurring. Now, what's not only can it result in archetypal possession, but it can result in archetypal projection as well. And so what is archetypal projection? Archetypal projection occurs when the anima and the animus is not integrated correctly. So what happens? So let's say the inner opposite of ourselves is not integrated correctly. What happens here? Well, this means that these unconscious elements will begin to control our lives from the background. So Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So, and this can happen in a number of ways. It can happen through possession. It can happen through projection. But regardless, you have these unconscious forces that are within you. And if you don't integrate them, if you don't make them conscious, they're going to be in the background controlling your life. And it's going to lead you to act in ways that can be very harmful. So we can imagine these evil spirits as those uncontrolled inner forces. So remember they said, oh, there's a form of an evil spirits. There's male evil spirits and female evil spirits. The male evil spirits target women that haven't integrated their masculine, and the evil women spirits target men that haven't integrated their inner feminine. And by the way, this is extremely cool, by the way. Do you see how intelligent Gnosticism is? Coming to these ideas that are extremely important when you understand them from a psychological perspective. But anyway, let's continue. If someone has not, right, let's say someone has not integrated their anima or animus, what happens? Well, according to this, it's in terms of evil spirits. But when we protect ourselves through unity, the spirits can't affect us. And this has to do with integrating the anima and the animus. And so there's the idea of uniting with one another. So we're going to talk a minute about what happens if one does not integrate. But the point is that if one does integrate, then you're effectively protected from these evil spirits. When we've integrated our inner energies, our inner opposite energies, we become balanced. We accept and embrace all of our psyche, and we become whole. And this wholeness shields us from negative forces that try to disrupt our lives. So that's a way to understand it, is when you integrate these inner opposites within you, you become whole. And when you become whole, you repel those forces, according to this, that would normally try and fill that wholeness with themselves and then direct and control your life. So for example, if you have according to this, if you have a man that hasn't integrated their inner feminine, well, an evil feminine spirit is going to fill that void. And likewise for the woman, an evil masculine force is going to fill that void. But if you have integrated, if the masculine integrated the female and the woman integrated the masculine, well, then it's whole and it's complete. There's no room for that evil spirit to get into. Now, in terms of psychology and the anima and the animus, we understand it a little differently. Obviously, we don't think of actual evil spirits, but we understand that we have these inner aspects, the inner masculine and the inner feminine, or just the inner opposite within us. And if we don't integrate it, it will control us. And we can think of that like those evil spirits. So integrating our inner masculine and feminine energies is crucial. It's not even just about balance and harmony. It very much is, but it protects us from the effects of unintegrated archetypes. So when we do this, we experience, so why do we even want to do this, right? What's the point of integrating our inner opposites? Well, we gain a lot of benefits from it. So for example, let's use, and I'm going to be a little more nuanced. Right now, I have to be very general, broad, and stereotypical. But I'm going to address that in a minute. But for a moment, let's be broad, general, and stereotypical because it helps understanding these ideas. Okay, so let's say that for men, embracing their anima leads to a deeper understanding of their emotions and greater empathy and nurturing qualities. You see? So when a masculine integrates their inner feminine, it's about being in touch. They gain the ability to be more in touch with their emotions. They gain a better ability to be more empathetic. They acquire more nurturing qualities. Now, for women, this can be about when they integrate the animus, it's about gaining assertiveness and confidence and a stronger sense of independence. And so this integration makes us whole, balanced, and capable of leading a healthy life. So that we understand that we're whole in ourselves and that we're not looking for that in another person. It's fine if we find that in another person. There's nothing wrong with that. But we want to understand that these are actually forces in the reason why that we are attracted to those that exhibit those qualities is because those qualities exist within us. And so when we see it out there, we inherently are drawn to it because we unconsciously want to unite with it. Okay? But when these aspects are not integrated, what happens? Well, we get positive consequences when we integrate them. We get negative consequences when we don't integrate them. So what does that mean? Well, for men, this can manifest as seeing women as objects to control and own and dominate. And this is obviously very unhealthy and oppressive, and not only in personal relationships, but in the world in terms of a patriarchal system. And this can come from projection and fear and insecurity and trying to dominate the feminine externally rather than integrating the feminine internally. They want to control it. They want to dominate it rather than integrating it. So what about a woman? For a woman, a lack of integrating the animus can result in viewing men primarily as resources to be exploited. All about money, security, etc. And so here a lot of manipulation can come into focus, and dependency. It can result in dependency as well, manipulating men for their money and their security, and then becoming dependent on them as well. So here, this is also very unhealthy. You are no longer actually building a healthy relationship, but it's more about material gain or financial and physical security instead of it being based on respect and love. And again, this can happen worldwide in addition to just in relationships. So when we don't integrate our anima and animus, these negative archetypes will be in the background, leading us to toxic patterns in relationships and our lives. And then so men and women are almost acting as adversaries rather than partners, where they seek to dominate or exploit the other. I'm sure you can see this everywhere. I see this all day long just on my Instagram stories. Men post stuff about that's very much leaning towards wanting to control and dominate women. And then a lot of times women are all about, oh, how much money they can get from a guy or the most expensive thing they bought from them or something. So it damages personal relationships, but also damages our society as well and creates these inequalities. So we have to be able to understand that embracing these inner aspects leads to not just only a healthy relationship, but a healthier world. So much damage is done because humanity is being controlled by these evil unconscious forces. Okay? Now, one thing that I want to point out now, we've been talking a lot about the anima and the animus and men and women. And why are we doing this? Because we're interpreting the Gospel of Philip. And the Gospel of Philip is all about uniting masculine and feminine, male and female, Jesus and Mary. It's very much about that. But we have to remember that this is symbolic and allegorical. So it's not literally about feminine and masculine, because what is feminine and what is masculine is a social construct. For example, we associate femininity with things like empathy, nurture, care, and masculinity with things like assertiveness and dominance, independence. But that's a social construct. It doesn't mean that every woman, that those qualities are necessarily and always associated with being a man or being a woman. That's created by social constructs. There are different constructs that have different ideas of understanding. So for example, like usually things like wisdom and reason is associated with masculinity. But if you look at Gnosticism, Sophia is the goddess of wisdom. And Eve is considered epinoia, or self-thinking thought. So it just depends on the particular culture, the particular society. And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's very important to understand that these are just allegories when we talk about male and female. It's an allegory for embracing our inner opposite. That's what it means. Not necessarily about femininity or masculinity. It's about embracing our inner opposite. We just talk about it in those terms because it's very easy to, because our society is very much built on that binary way of thinking. But we have to remember that it's not actually about that. And why is that important? Because we don't want to, there's a lot of New Age systems that have interpreted this divine masculine and divine feminine in a very toxic way. Like, oh, all men have to be this way and all women have to be this way. And this is how reality is inherently structured. No, it's not about that. These are allegories and these are metaphors for different energies that reside within us. It's ultimately about embracing both sides of our psyche to achieve harmony. So we can even think about it, instead of masculine and feminine, you can think of it like left hemispheric functions of the brain and right hemispheric functions of the brain. You can think of You can think of it as uniting brain hemispheric functions. You can get rid of masculine and feminine altogether and make it all about uniting brain hemispheric functions. So talking about male and female is way too simplistic and binary, but it's easy to do. We're talking in terms of metaphors. And when we do that, it's helpful. But in truth, if we're being literal, if we're being about how the world actually works, well, many people don't fit neatly into the binary categories of male or female. So instead, in the Neogenian system, we don't have the idea of the anima or the animus. We have the mirror self. It's similar to the anima and the animus, but it's much more modern and integrates the idea. It gets rid of the binary. And instead of thinking of, oh, all men have an inner feminine and all women have an inner masculine, it's just everyone has an inner opposite, the mirror self. And we can see that this is even, it's nicely said here, that this happens in the mirrored bridal chamber, which I think is really cool because that idea of the mirror is very much associated with these ideas. But anyway, the mirror self is the inner opposite. And so this can also include non-binary and gender fluid identities. So putting it in these terms helps us avoid all of the very harmful stereotypes that are prevalent, not only in just the modern world, but in a lot of new age systems, that toxic idea of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. There's nothing wrong with talking about the divine masculine and divine feminine. That's totally fine. But if you have to understand that these are allegories and symbols and metaphors for underlying structures of reality and not literally. And the reason why that's important is because look at how many people are, like Christianity is against homosexuality because they go, oh, well, in the beginning, it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. God created man and woman. So that's how it's supposed to be. So if you have a new age system that's like, oh, well, there's male and female forces, and that's how reality is supposed to be, that can lead to a lot of negative consequences if you take that literally. So anyway, I'm not going to go too much more into it, but it's about realizing that we're talking about this in a metaphorical and allegorical way. And so to be more accurate, like in the Neogenian system, we talk about the mirror self, which is all about recognizing and integrating the parts of ourselves that we don't normally identify with. So someone who's non-binary or gender fluid, this process of integration is equally as vital as to someone who identifies as male or female. It's about embracing and understanding all aspects of our identity, regardless of what societal label that we're applying to it. Because whether you identify as male or female, or non-binary or gender, whatever you identify as, you have an inner opposite. Okay. So that's important to remember. So the anima and the animus, we're really talking about inner qualities that are representative in anyone, regardless of gender. Okay. It doesn't follow typical stereotypical gender roles. So the other part that it says here that's really cool, it says, so if the image and the angel are united with one another, neither can any venture to go into the man or the woman. So this is a really another really cool thing that we're talking about is, so first of all, how do you repel these evil spirits? You repel these evil spirits by becoming whole. What are these evil spirits? These evil spirits are unconscious aspects of ourselves that can direct our lives in negative ways unless we integrate and embrace them and unite with them. So it's about exploring these aspects of ourselves, exploring these qualities of ourselves. So, but it also says, so the image and the angel are united with one another, neither can any venture to go into man or the woman. So the image and the angel, that's another really cool metaphor, talking about the angel as being the spiritual being and the image being like the projection or the lower form or the representation of it. An image is like a representation. So for the true spiritual being and the representation, when the true spiritual being and the representation are united, also it becomes whole. This is another way to look at it, kind of like the lower self uniting with the higher self, understanding your true self, understanding that you are the angel. You are a spiritual being. So to avoid these evil spirits is about understanding what you are and integrating all these different aspects of yourself. So let's continue here because there's a lot more that I want to get to. It says, he who comes out of the world and so can no longer be detained on the grounds that he was in the world evidently is above the desire and fear. He is master. He is superior to envy. There's parts that are missing from this because it's a damaged manuscript. It says, if blank comes, they seize him and throttle him. And how will this one be able to escape the great blank powers? Probably evil powers or something like that. The evil forces. How will he be able to blank? There are some who say we are faithful in order that the blank unclean spirits and demons. For if they had the Holy Spirit, no unclean spirit would cleave to them. Fear not the flesh, nor love it. If you fear it, it will gain mastery over you. If you love it, it will swallow and paralyze you. All right, so this passage is a little hard because there's a lot of pieces missing. But ultimately what it's talking about is those who transcend worldly desires and fears can't be detained by the evil powers. The evil powers, the archons, the rulers, can't keep them trapped in the material world if they transcend worldly desires and fears. If they have mastery over these influences, they're not subject to the control of these evil, unclean spirits. So it's about overcoming fear, worldly attachments, and influences. Now, I just want to make a quick interjection here, is that the Valentinian Gnostics and many of the Gnostics were extremely opposed to the material world. They looked at the material world as being totally evil. They were often against intercourse because they saw that as an evil, defiling act of the world. So Gnostics are great, but I disagree with this part very much. I don't agree with this. And in the Neogenian system, we don't look at the material world as being inherently evil. We look at the material world as being our world to create whatever we want. Unfortunately, it's been created into a shithole because terrible people rule the world. And so it's not a fun place to be in. And it seems like hell, which is why the Gnostics interpreted it like that. But if we are able to transform the world, which is exactly what we want to do by creating a teleocratic planetary civilization in the new Neogenian era, that's what we want to do, then the world will become a paradise. The world will become a magnificent place. And I just want to put that out there, that we aren't about, there's nothing wrong with experiencing the world. So what is the meaning of life? The meaning of life is to experience it and understand it. What does a God do? What should a God do in their creation? Why does a God create? To enjoy their creation. That's why a God creates. So reality isn't about escaping, trying to escape to nirvana or escape to heaven or ascend to the source. Of course, we will ascend to the source at some point, but right now, what we're here to do is transform ourselves and transform the world. And if everyone who was so focused on escaping focused instead on transforming, we'd have a new world overnight. It is from fire and water that the soul and the spirit came into being. It is from water and fire and light that the son of the bridal chamber came into being. The fire is the chrism, the light is the fire. I am not referring to that fire which has no form, but to the other fire whose form is white, which is bright and beautiful, and which gives beauty. So this is talking about opposites again. You have fire and water, clearly opposites. And then the light that is the son of the bridal chamber that came into being, that sort of is most likely about unification of opposites once again. The truth did not come into the world. Let's see here. Let me make sure I'm at the right spot. Let's see. The truth did not come in. Oh, this is a good one. The truth did not come into the world naked, but came in types and images. The world will not receive truth in any other way. What does that mean? Truth did not come in the world naked, but in types and images. The world will not receive truth in any other way. Meaning that truth isn't something that is obvious. It's not something that is revealed. In other words, when it says that truth didn't come into the world naked, it means that spiritual truths or truths about reality are often conveyed through symbols and metaphors rather than what it actually is in itself. That truth comes veiled in types and images. Truth comes veiled in symbols and metaphors. And this whole book is filled with symbols and metaphors. So you can see what they're trying to say is that truth is not something that comes to you as it really is. It comes to you in symbols and metaphors. Now, we can access truth in itself. We can do that. We can understand the formal mathematical nature of reality through logic and reason. We can do that. But many times it comes to us in intuitions through metaphors and symbols. And this is the big problem with a lot of New Age and mystical systems today, is that they access the symbols and metaphors, which is great, but they take the symbols and metaphors as being literally true. When what one needs to do is analyze those symbols and metaphors with logic and reason to discover what they're actually trying to convey. So that's an important aspect here. So there is a rebirth and an image of rebirth. It is certainly necessary to be born again through the image. Which one? Resurrection. The image must rise again through the image. The bridal chamber and the image must enter through the image into the truth. This is the restoration. Not only must those who produce the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit do so, but have produced them for you. If one does not acquire them, the name Christian will also be taken from him. But one receives the unification of the blank of the power of the cross. This power the apostles called the right and the left. For this person is no longer a Christian, but a Christ. It's really cool. The power of the right and the left. Again, opposites, united. Those who receive the power of the right and the left is no longer a Christian, but a Christ. I love that. And that's so cool. And that's what's important to understand about what we're doing here. We are not Christians. We are Christs. Christianity teaches that you can't be Christ, that Christ is separate from you. So we're not Christians because that steals your divinity away. We are Christs. We are divine beings ourselves when we unite the powers of the right and the left, when we become whole. So this is really cool. It's talking about, this whole passage is talking about the importance of being born again, but not physically, but spiritually. And this is used through the metaphor of resurrection, rising again. And then it talks about the bridal chamber, which is about unification and transformation. So they're combining all these metaphors together about the bridal chamber, combining opposites together, about being born again through a new understanding, and about resurrecting, being ascending. So this is a restoration. It talks about it as a restoration. Well, what do you mean by restoration? Well, if you think of something that was once united and you broke it into pieces, when you restore it, you make it whole again. So the restoration is a return to wholeness and purity. So it also says it's not just about the names like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It's not just about using their names. It's about becoming these aspects. If not, this title of Christian means nothing, essentially. And when one does combine these powers together, one is not merely a Christian. One transcends the label of Christian. What does it say? Exactly. This person is no longer a Christian, but a Christ. I love that. That's so cool. You see, when you become a Christ, you're not a Christian. You have transcended that. Christ is not a Christian. So Christianity is a false light that completely distorts the message of Christ, which is about becoming Christ. I love that. Very powerful quote. I'm going to highlight that because, where was that? Such a good one. Remember, you can read all this stuff for free on gnosis.org. Great resource. You can read all this stuff. So let's see where we're at here. The Lord did everything in a mystery, a baptism and a chrism and a Eucharist and a redemption and a bridal chamber. He said, I came to make things below like the things above and the things outside like those inside. I came to unite them in the place, here through types and images. The Lord did everything in a mystery, meaning the Lord did everything in metaphors and symbols and allegories, in hidden knowledge. Hidden knowledge is how the Lord works. And Christ said, I came to make, look at all the themes of unification of opposites. I came to make the things below like the things above. Very similar to the Hermetic aphorism, as above, so below. The things outside, like those inside, I came to unite them in the place. The place is referred to as the true spiritual realm. Now, what's really cool about this is that Christ said something extremely similar in the Gospel of Thomas, another banned Gospel of Thomas, but in even more detail. So I just want to read you real quick that passage from the Gospel of Thomas because it's so similar to this one, but goes into more detail. So this is from the Gospel of Thomas. It says, Jesus said to them, his disciples, when you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female, when you make the eyes in place of an eye, a hand in place of a hand, and a foot in place of a foot, an image in place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom. So in order to enter the kingdom, and remember, entering the kingdom, Christ said, where's the kingdom? It's within you and all around you. So entering the kingdom isn't like, oh, I'm going to poof, disappear and vanish into some other domain or go to heaven. It's a state of consciousness. It's a state of enlightenment. It's a higher awareness that transcends self-awareness. This is what we call all awareness or hyper-awareness in the Neogenian system. When you do all these things, when you make the two into one, the inner like the outer, the male like the female, and the female like the male, when you transcend all these binaries and unify them into a wholeness, you will enter the kingdom. You will attain a higher enlightened state of consciousness. And this is the whole endeavor of Christ. This is what Christ was trying to get people to understand and realize. Unfortunately, it was twisted by the church. And so that's what the gospel, let's continue again with the Gospel of Philip. The Gospel of Philip says, before Christ, some came from a place they were no longer able to enter, and they went where they were no longer able to come out. Then Christ came. Those who went in, he brought out, and those who went out, he brought in. This is essentially just saying that before Christ came, some came from a place they were no longer able to enter, meaning that people came from the realm, souls came from the realm of the divine light into the material world, but they couldn't go back to the realm of divine light. They couldn't go back to the spiritual domain. But when Christ came, they were able to. Why? Because Christ is just representative of bringing knowledge. Christ isn't a savior in the sense of, oh, magically Christ waves his magical wand or gets crucified on the cross and suddenly everyone is saved. Christ is just a person who understood what he was and wanted others to understand that as well. So that's basically saying that just Christ brought this knowledge to the world. That's what they believed. Now, of course, we can't know everything about the actual Jesus Christ who existed in history, but you have to look at this and see what makes more sense and what's healthier. What's the healthier interpretation? And finally, it says, when Eve was still with Adam, you see all these opposites. The Gospel of Philip is such an interesting gospel, all about the unification of opposites. When Eve was still with Adam, death did not exist. When she was separated from him, death came into being. If he enters again and attains his former self, death will be no more. Well, what does this mean? It means that Adam and Eve were originally a single being. So in the apocalypse of Adam, another Gnostic gospel, Adam is talking to his son Seth and tells his son that he and Eve were originally a single being known as an eon, and that the evil creator god Yaldabaoth divided them into two eons and then trapped them in material bodies. So this is essentially saying that when Eve was united with Adam and Adam was united with Eve, death didn't exist. They were eternal spiritual beings. But when they were separated, death came into being, meaning you enter into the illusory domain of division. If he enters again and attains his former self, death will be no more. If one attains unity and wholeness, if Adam unites with Eve again, then they will be able to enter the kingdom. Then they will understand what they truly are. Then they will understand this higher state of awareness. So there's a couple different things here going on. Remember, it's about attaining a higher state of awareness. And there's also the spiritual domain. Like, we actually do come from a spiritual domain. In the Neogenian system, this is the frequency domain. It's a domain of mathematical frequency patterns. It's nothing woo-woo or mystical. It's a well-defined mathematical domain. And so we exist within this mathematical domain of frequency patterns, and this gets projected as space-time information that we are able to interpret through the avatars, which we as eternal minds interface with, from frequency functions interacting with a space-time function and integrating with them. And so when we are separate from the understanding of what we really are, well, death enters into reality because we believe that we're mortal, we believe that we're singular, we believe that we're individual, we believe that we're ephemeral, we believe that we're contingent. But when we understand what we truly are, we realize that we are eternal. We are beings of divine light. We are eternal frequencies that are necessary, the ground of existence that must exist and always will exist. We have been doing this for eternity. And this entails understanding our inner opposite. So I'm releasing 5 different books for the Neogenian system. This is going to be all in one of my books. It's going to be all about this. It's about integrating, because there's not just the mirror self. There's also the shadow self and the power self. So you have the shadow self, the mirror self, and the power self. All of these must be integrated to achieve the actualization of the inner star, your true self, your higher self, your actual self. And so when we take a look at this, which is really cool, this whole thing started off with how to protect yourself from evil spirits, but we really see, what are these evil spirits? They're aspects of ourselves. And how do we resist and protect ourselves from these evil spirits? From mastering ourselves, from becoming whole, by understanding what we are. When we become whole, those evil spirits have no control over us. In other words, the unconscious forces that work behind the scenes manipulating our life no longer are able to do so when we make them conscious and harness their power to work in concert with all the other archetypes in our mind, so that we are guided by our own conscious will rather than unconscious processes. So this particular one is all about uniting with the inner opposite. That's what the Gospel of Philip is all about, uniting with the inner opposite. And it says, when you unite with the inner opposites, you will be whole. And essentially, there's no room for the evil spirits because you're complete. You are whole. I want to emphasize again, though, in the Neogenian system, these evil spirits are not actually evil external beings. They are aspects of your psyche, your inner opposite. Then when it's not integrated, will direct and control your life from a background, which can lead into mirror self-projection and mirror self-possession, depending on how you. There's different ways that this can, whether it's projection or possession, it will have different effects, or if it's a combination of the two. But projection will result in people trying to dominate each other, people trying to use each other as a resource, and because people see the inner opposite as something to fear or control or to take over, rather than integrating it as a part of themselves. So how do we build a better self, a whole self, a complete self, and a better society, a better culture, a better world? By integrating our inner opposites, by becoming whole. And this doesn't mean that if you identify as male, doesn't mean you have to act like a woman. And it doesn't mean if you are someone who identifies as a woman that you have to act like a man. And if you're someone who's non-binary, it doesn't mean you have to change any way that is in relation to your identity. It's about harnessing these forces so that you lead a more complete and whole life. Remember, we don't even have to think of it in terms of masculine and feminine. We can think of it in terms of left hemispheric functions and right hemispheric functions. So just because you are more empathetic doesn't mean you need to go out and wear dresses. And just because you are someone who cultivates confidence and independence and assertiveness doesn't mean you have to wear pants. But you can if you want to. That's the great thing, is that this world is our playground and we can express ourselves in any way that we so will. As long as we're not hurting others, we can express ourselves in a way that makes us feel like we are in touch with our actual self, that we are expressing ourselves in a way that allows us to understand ourselves better and to express ourselves to the world better. So I want to get that across as well. Remember, it's not this weird binary. It's just helpful to understand it this way sometimes. And that's how it's expressed in this gospel. That's why we're talking about it this way. But it's about the inner opposite You can think about it in terms of left hemispheric functions and right hemispheric functions. And when all is said and done, you are here to create yourself into whatever you so will. You can think of it like a video game. You can change your avatar. You can change your skill points. You can change your occupation. You can change. It's a video game. This is a game for us here to play. So let's start having fun, okay? Let's stop hating each other for our differences and realize, hey, this is a game. Let's have some fun together. Let's play this game. Let's enjoy this game, not make it this miserable, horrific thing that we have today, but instead create a world where we are maximizing the quality of life for everyone. And that's exactly what we intend to do in our teleocratic planetary civilization. And thank you so much for joining me, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this. I have a whole playlist on the Gospel of Philip. Go check it out. Like I said last week, we talked about Mary Magdalene and Christ kissing. There's a whole playlist, a lot more videos on my channel that discuss all these topics. And remember, my book is out right now, Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind, available on Amazon. Link is in the description. And the pre-order for my second book, Meta-Rationalism, The New Science of Mind, is available on Amazon as well. Follow my podcast on Spotify. Look up Dawn of the New Earth on Spotify. It's a great way to spread this information on another platform. It's a great, easy way to listen to this information and watch this information as well. And finally, hey, if you enjoy my work, become a member on YouTube or on Patreon. You get access to members-only videos every single week, and it helps out a lot. It's the best way to support my channel. All right, big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Nusalina, Eric, Christopher, Luke, Thomas, Ryan, Ian, David, and everyone else. Thank you very much.